The silence during the trip absorbed the attention of the married couple sitting in the car. Outside the windows, landscapes flashed by trees, fields, and the occasional house, but neither Ray Thompson nor his wife Marilyn seemed to notice them. They were lost in their own thoughts, which seemed to be far more meaningful than anything the surrounding space had to offer. Ray drove the car confidently, his gaze fixed on the road ahead. From time to time, as if by chance, he allowed himself a short, barely noticeable glance at his wife. These glances were cautious and fleeting, as if he was afraid of being caught doing something forbidden. But every time his eyes touched her profile, something painfully and at the same time tenderly squeezed in her chest. Marilyn sat in the passenger seat with her head turned toward the window. She looked at the views flying past, but her gaze was empty, absent-minded. She was focused not on what she saw, but on what she felt. Sometimes, when it seemed safe to her, she would turn her gaze to the cloudy reflection of her husband in the glass of the window. His profile, distorted and blurred, seemed almost ghostly to her. But even in this distortion, she could distinguish familiar features: the jawline, high cheekbones, barely noticeable wrinkles on the forehead. A special, fragile harmony reigned between them, which arises only between couples who have lived together for many years. Subconscious signals, small gestures, almost imperceptible glances, all this became part of their silent communication. When one of them was about to look at the other, the second, as if by an inner call, turned away, avoiding crossing glances. It was a game where they both knew the rules and followed them flawlessly. This habit, this ritual, has existed in their lives for a long time. They learned to avoid direct conflict, learned to talk to each other only when necessary, and only about what required discussion. Their conversations were extremely polite, honed to the perfect balance between neutrality and formal concern. "We're damn polite to each other," Ray thought as he briefly glanced at Marilyn. She was dressed in a black dress that emphasized her figure, and dark silk stockings that hugged her slender legs. Her ankles were gracefully crossed, as if she was sitting not in a car, but in a luxurious chair at a social reception. Her dark hair fell over her shoulders, cascading like black satin. Ray felt his gaze drawn to her neck, to the faint curve of her chin, to the soft lines of her cheeks and lips. He remembered how once those lips could stretch into a playful smile, how her eyes could glow with sparkles of happiness. But now between them lay an abyss, invisible but almost tangible. Ah, but her body, that exquisite, feminine, fragile, and at the same time strong body that once drove him crazy in their student years, still awed him. Even now, when she sat with her back to him, her figure, smoothly flowing from a thin waist to soft rounded hips, was still delightful to him. The car continued to move forward, cutting through the ribbon of empty road. Outside the window stretched endless fields, sparse trees, and a dim sky. There was silence in the cabin, uncomfortable but familiar. Each of them was immersed in their thoughts, in their memories, in their regrets. This trip seemed to go on forever. But maybe somewhere ahead, there was a turning point waiting for them, not only on the road, but also in their relationship. Ray wasn't sure if he really believed it. But somewhere deep inside, in the darkest and most intimate part of his soul, there was a small spark of hope. And while the car continued its path forward, and time flowed inexorably, this spark burned weakly but confidently. However, it didn't matter. He memorized every cell of her body with his eyes and touches. Hell, this went even further. He knew the taste of every part of her and inhaled her scent throughout the 9 years of their marriage. He was sure that if he were blinded and allowed to simply rest his head on her body, he could recognize her by her heartbeat, by the rhythm of her breathing, by her smell, by the texture of her skin. Ray felt guilty about his thoughts about Marilyn. How can I think about her now? Hadn't she made him aware, through her words and actions, where he fit in the grand scheme of things? It was another loss, another pain, another numbness from an emptiness that could not be filled. These feelings haunted Ray for too long. How long has it been? 62 months? 62 months of daily agony. He kept a daily tally. It was day number 1865 of his personal hell. Will all this end now? Will he get relief, no matter how painful it may be? Will he feel like he's breathing again? Marilyn Thompson felt her husband's attention being drawn away from her. She took a quick glance at the blurry reflection in the glass for confirmation, and now began to study the man to whom she had once promised herself. Her emotions were in turmoil. There were so many good things to remember and too many bad things to forget. Why can't he give me the support I need? She thought. Why did I even have to look for something that is a basic human need? Then her conscience intervened and asked if she herself had provided the same support to her husband. Annoyed by this self-analysis, Marilyn focused on the sad, frozen expression on Ray's face. She knew that the torment he was experiencing was equal to her own. She wanted to work up the courage to start a conversation. But every time she tried this last year, she was rejected. And every time Ray awkwardly tried to discuss their problems, she responded with harshness and closed in on herself. Now their relationship has been reduced to meaningless conversations, cold politeness, and guilt. It didn't start out that way. There was once a blinding love between them. Once upon a time, they were bound by a bond that united two people in the bliss of one happiness. They were one even before they went through the wedding ceremony. Neither of them could bear to be separated from each other. As they looked into each other's eyes, as they exchanged their wedding vows, they both thought they could never love each other more than they did in that moment. They were wrong. 14 months after their wedding, on Christmas Day, Rachel Lee Thompson came into their lives. Now both knew that life would never be the same, and they felt how their souls united into a cherished trinity. Marilyn remembered Ray's stunned look in the delivery room when he saw his daughter for the first time. Then his face transformed into the most tender expression of adoration as he looked at Marilyn, exhausted from childbirth, with her newborn in her arms, and began to cry with happiness. This caused him to join in the cascade of tears as the three of them clung to each other briefly before the medical team began postpartum procedures. Thus began their journey to becoming ideal parents. From almost hourly calls, the two grandmothers were able to ease the fears and anxieties of the new parents, while at the same time beginning the process of pampering their beautiful little granddaughter. Marilyn's parents were so enamored with their granddaughter that they moved across the country to live nearby. Thus began life in the Thompson family home, and every day was a miracle of discovery with their child. Feeding, sleep patterns, changing diapers, quiet rocking at 2 in the morning to soothe the baby with a soft lullaby. There was rapt attention as they watched the baby lying on her stomach on the living room carpet and her attempts to get up on all fours. Growth and weight gain, doctor visits and vaccinations, photographs of the baby using all the gifts given on her first holiday, and copies of these photographs sent along with thank you notes to the donors as a sign of gratitude. Video recordings of every significant event, gradual development of hand, eye, and muscle coordination. A blissful look when she recognized the faces and voices of her parents as soon as they entered the room, and her radiant smile, accompanied by the joyful twitching of her little body. The first crawling, the first sounds, the first strong squeeze of the parents' fingers. Baby food and non-spill bottles. The first mom that brought Marilyn and Ray to tears. Standing up on your feet and then plopping back down on your butt. Every day brought a little more progress and confidence, and then that first hesitant step. They soon began to move a short distance away to encourage Rachel to come towards them, celebrating every successful step. Pain due to teething. Expanding vocabulary and enjoying trying to understand Rachel's desires. The era of the terrible 2 years and potty training. Buying new clothes to keep up with Rachel's growth. Third and fourth birthday celebrations where Rachel's beaming face was covered in smeared pieces of chocolate cake. All this and thousands of other moments that changed the lives of parents just as they changed the life of every family. And like all parents, Marilyn and Ray were sure that their child was the smartest and most beautiful of all who had ever been born. After all, everyone wants their child to be special, unique, and Rachel Lee Thompson was unique. She had something that tens of millions of other children did not have: leukemia. Marilyn recalled the devastation she felt as she and Ray sat in the pediatrician's office as he tried to balance his concerns with reassurances for the couple. Rachel's latest test results had some alarming indicators. Nothing serious, just something that requires further testing. Then another consultation, and an even more worried look on the doctor's face. More tests, more alarming results, and the uncertainty of a referral to an oncologist, and the zombie-like reactions of Marilyn and Ray as they walked out of the pediatrician's office with Rachel walking between them, holding their hands, unaware of the looming shadow. Initial consultation with an oncologist, new tests, new horror, and then this terrible word sounded, cancer. The doctor's sentence sounded like a judge's death sentence. Marilyn went into hysterics right in the office, and Ray was not far from her. The experienced oncologist had seen this happen too many times and used his knowledge to reassure Marilyn and Ray. He talked about advances in treatment, precise targeting of cells, and improved survival rates. Rachel will get better treatment. He stressed that he and his team of doctors and nurses will do everything possible to fight this insidious disease. And yet, after they left the office and sat with Rachel in her room, both hugged her and cried. And poor little Rachel sat on the bed, surrounded by her parents, wondering why they were crying. An unknown fear, in turn, made her cry, which led to a new wave of tears from her parents. Marilyn started crying again in the car. She pulled a tissue from her purse and wiped her eyes, wasting no time in searching. After 5 years of practice, she was able to do it quickly and confidently. Her movement caught Ray's attention, and he again wondered whether he should try to console his wife. But now, he thought grimly, Marilyn had found solace elsewhere, and to be honest, he too. He again mentally ran through the chain of events that had led them to this moment. He remembered how they sat and rehearsed how to tell Rachel about her illness. He remembered how Marilyn had so calmly begun to tell Rachel that she was sick and that they would have to make frequent visits to doctors and hospitals before she got better. Ray was a shaky bundle of nerves, but following Marilyn's example, he began to reassure Rachel that everything would be fine. Mom and Dad won't let anything bad happen to her. God, what a lie that was. All these drugs, all the injections, all this chemotherapy, this damn chemistry. Watch how Rachel bravely endures all this, blindly trusting her parents that they wouldn't do anything to hurt her. His poor baby was returning home after treatment without an appetite. The pain of holding the basin by his daughter's bed while she vomited and suffered. The pallor of her face as she grew weaker. Her hair, that shiny black hair inherited from Marilyn, fell out of her head in clumps. He remembered how upset Marilyn and Rachel had been when it came time to shave Rachel's head. He told them to wait until he returned. He went to the nearest barber shop and asked to shave his head. When he came out, it was unusual for him to feel the wind blowing across his bare skull, and people looked with curiosity at the contrast between his white skin on his head and his tan face. When Marilyn and Rachel saw him, they were shocked, but their surprise soon turned to laughter as first Rachel and then Marilyn began to stroke his head. He enjoyed Rachel's soft touches as she asked if it hurt to shave. He said it didn't hurt at all, which calmed Rachel down a little. Then he saw the pure gratitude on Marilyn's face for his sacrifice. The car stopped at a red light, and Ray's memories were interrupted. It had been a long time since he had seen a look like that on Marilyn's face. Coincidentally, at the same moment, Marilyn was remembering Ray's haircut. He did this to support her baby. But however, Ray was always there for Rachel, and with her too. Only his quiet courage inspired her to do what she did. She urgently made an appointment at the beauty salon and, going inside, told Antoine exactly what she wanted. For almost 20 minutes, Antoine begged her to change her mind, but her decision was firm. In the end, she explained why this was necessary, and Antoine agreed with tears in his eyes. Soon, Marilyn was stunned to look at her reflection in the large mirror, which showed off her bald head. The rest of the stylists and their clients were crying too. The story spread throughout the salon from one workstation to another. Antoine hugged her when she went to pay for the service. However, on her way to the checkout, she was stopped at every workstation where stylists insisted on hugging her. Even some customers came up to hug her. When she finally went to the counter to pay, she was informed that Antoine had forbidden him to accept money from her. Marilyn insisted on payment, but Antoine was adamant. She should not pay anything for the service. Marilyn felt deeply touched by this act of compassion on the part of Antoine and the others. When she left the salon, in the parking lot, she heard loud laughter from a group of teenagers who were pointing fingers at her. She steeled herself, ignored their ignorant taunts, and reminded herself of what was truly important: solidarity with her husband and daughter. Her husband's action brought laughter. Hers were tears when Rachel realized that she would not go through this test alone. As Ray hugged her, he whispered, "Oh, baby." His hands stroked his wife's shaved head. She whispered back, "Everything is fine. It will grow back." Then she smiled and said, "It just means you'll have to buy me and Rachel every Hermes scarf we want until our hair grows back." And God bless him, he did just that. Every day he brought home 2 boxes, one scarf for each of the women he loved so much. Marilyn and Rachel tried them on, exchanged them, and were happy with the new patterns. On the days when Rachel felt well enough, they went out in public, not paying attention to the looks of others. They were united by their love. At least that's how it all started. Ray and Marilyn knew from the beginning that Rachel's illness had significantly increased the stress levels in their lives. Every night in bed, they discussed how to deal with everyday situations while cuddling. Sometimes they ended these conversations by making love until the morning. Sometimes they just silently hugged each other until sleep overcame them. Every day they went to work, and the first thing they did was tell their colleagues the news about Rachel's condition. Marilyn worked as a graphic designer for a mid-sized company with about 50 employees. Every morning, when she shared the latest developments, her colleagues reminded her not to be shy about asking for help. She always answered that she would definitely contact her, but in fact, she never thought that she would need it. She had strong support from colleagues, family, friends, and neighbors. Although she appreciated offers of help, she never truly shared her feelings. She allowed herself to be the center of attention, allowed people to care about her, but no one could fully understand her. How could they if they weren't going through the same thing? She would silently do her job, return home, and relieve her mother or mother-in-law on duty to care for her daughter. Ray was the youngest employee at the law firm. Although his partners were sympathetic to his situation, the end result was most important. Ray had to make a profit. He relied on his secretary, Karen, to keep him in line. Every morning she brought him a cup of coffee and asked how he was feeling. He spent a few minutes sharing his personal experiences with her until the calls came in and the meetings began. So, in a nutshell, the Thompson family navigated the emotional roller coaster of their lives. Often their daily routine would be interrupted by a new procedure Rachel had to undergo, and then they would drop everything to be with their daughter. They then returned to their work responsibilities, trying to make up for what they had missed. Time has a way of corroding everything. Imperceptibly, minute by minute, it ate away at the marriage of Ray and Marilyn. This happened so gradually that they did not even notice how they began to move away from each other. They were still by Rachel's side every free moment. They delegated responsibilities to each other in a way that was best for their daughter. Rachel's recovery was their top priority, but stress and time quietly turned minor irritations into grievances. "I swear, Karen, it seems that no matter what I do, she always finds a flaw in it," Ray once complained to his secretary. Karen nodded sympathetically, encouraging him to continue. "Marilyn was upset that we made an appointment with the doctor only 10 minutes before the appointment. When does it ever happen that you are received exactly at the appointed time? Never. Am I right?" Ray continued to nervously walk around his office, and Karen did not take her eyes off him. Of course, we waited half an hour before we were even invited into the office. And then, as soon as Rachel was far enough away, she came at me. Honestly, I already have my mouth full of worries, and now this. Karen intervened softly. "Mr. Thompson, you just need to sit down and talk to your wife. You've invested too much in this relationship to let it all go down the drain. Just take the time to explain that you are doing your best and that you understand that she is doing her best too." "I understand, Karen, and I'm trying, I really am, but sometimes it's just beyond my strength, you know," Ray sighed. "Thank you for letting me let off some steam. I think it's time for us to look into the Joneses' contract. You're welcome, Mr. Thompson. If you ever need to talk again, just call me. Ray watched his attractive secretary leave his office. I'm lucky to have such a sensible assistant, he thought. God, I'm afraid of the day when she comes in and says she's quitting because she's getting married. With her looks, she probably has plenty of suitors. Maybe I should give her a raise to keep her from leaving. Across town, a frustrated Marilyn was furiously working on her latest project. Her boss, John Tullos, quietly walked up to her cubicle and began studying her computer screen. Marilyn felt uncomfortable under his gaze, but continued to work on the task. After a minute, John reached out and deleted her project. What the hell, John? Marilyn was indignant. She was shocked that an entire week of her work had been erased with one keystroke. To my office, Marilyn. John walked towards his office, and his office neighbors studiously avoided eye contact with him or with Marilyn, who was nervously about to follow the boss. Entering the office, she closed the door and sat down as he asked. Now she waited anxiously for an explanation. Marilyn, I understand that you are going through a lot of stress right now. The problem is that it starts to affect your work. It took me less than 30 seconds to realize that the parameters in your project were completely wrong. Looks like you've been wrong for a week now. Marilyn blushed at his words and began to apologize, but John raised his hand. It's okay, Marilyn. We have enough time to fix everything and meet the deadlines. But I care about you. You are the best person in my department, and when you feel bad, it affects all of us. Like I said, I understand this is a difficult time for you. Tell me how I can help. Do you need a vacation, sabbatical? Maybe you need an assistant. What do you need, Marilyn? Talk to me. Marilyn stared at the floor. John, I'm sorry I ruined everything. I have so many things on my mind right now. Doctors are talking about a bone marrow transplant, and we are looking for suitable donors. All I can think is that this will cause my daughter more pain. Ray will be the first donor, and the other day I yelled at him because we were almost late to the doctor. My husband is trying to save our daughter's life, and I'm just picking on him. She fell silent, trying to pull herself together. I need a job, John. We need health insurance for Rachel. But I also need that distraction of not seeing my daughter suffer so I don't go crazy. I know it sounds counterintuitive, but it's true. Marilyn, that makes sense, John said quietly. I never talked about it at work, but I lost my father to cancer when I was a child. And I remember how it affected me and my mother. She also worked to keep herself from going crazy, and I played outside all day long so as not to see how he was fading away in his room. Now I understand that he was not angry with me for this. He didn't want me to see him like this. Marilyn, I know that you keep everything to yourself, because I do the same myself. But sometimes you need to talk. If you ever need to talk, call me. I'll help as much as I can. Now go and settle everything with your husband. Agreed? Relieved, Marilyn stood up and smiled. Thank you, John. As she left his office, she thought how lucky she was to have such an understanding boss. At Christmas, Rachel turned 5 years old. She was surrounded by her entire family, parents, grandparents, uncles, aunts, and cousins as a birthday cake was brought out in front of her. She made a wish after everyone sang "Happy Birthday," and Marilyn helped the weakened girl blow out the candles. When asked what she wished for, she replied that she was dreaming of a white Christmas. No one bothered to tell her how rarely it snowed in their region. Instead, they diverted her attention to the mountains of gifts. Ray, moving with difficulty, tried to record everything on camera. He has still not fully recovered from the bone marrow harvesting procedure. He remembered the pain he suffered and knew Rachel felt the same. His eyes filled with tears and the camera's viewfinder blurred. He quickly handed the camera to Marilyn to recover. He ran his hand over the stubble of hair growing on his head. He and Marilyn were willing to stay bald for Rachel, but she told them she liked them better with hair. He looked at his wife and noticed that her hair was also starting to grow back. It will take time for them to reach the length she likes again, he thought. But it will certainly be a long time before they approach the length they were when I first met her. God, I remember everything like it was yesterday, he thought, plunging into memories of his student years. He and a few friends from his hometown stuck together to cope with the stress of the sudden transition to university life on a large campus. It's funny, he didn't particularly like some of the guys in the group. It was more of a safety in numbers thing. The group, taking with them a few random roommates, decided to go to a freshman party. The most self-confident of the guys immediately disappeared into the crowd full of young, attractive girls, who, in turn, stayed in groups for mass protection. Ray watched with envy as one by one his friends noticed a girl they were interested in and started talking to her. That's not how Ray was built. He knew that if he approached and tried to talk to a beautiful girl, he would start stuttering, talking nonsense, and eventually convincing her that she was talking to a real idiot. No, for Ray it took time. First he needed to get to know the person, get used to his presence. Then he could lower his defenses and begin to show his best qualities: compassion, care, empathy, humor, kindness, loyalty, and other traits that cannot be seen in a fleeting moment of communication. However, as he watched some of the guys fail, he wondered if he would ever find someone he was meant to be with. He noticed that several of his friends had already overcome the stage of awkward acquaintances and were now chatting animatedly with groups of girls, who in response nodded towards the guys, looking at them appraisingly. Ray realized that he would most likely be attached to a suitable companion, or should I say a wing mate, and while his opinion will be taken into account, the deciding factor will be the collective decision of the group, at least for this first meeting. Gradually, groups of boys and girls merged with each other, and names and introductions were heard amid the noise of the party. It was funny to see the confused expressions on people's faces as they tried to remember names for the rest of the evening. It was also easy to understand which pairs worked out well and which were doomed to failure from the start. Ray was immersed in the whirlpool of the party when the girl whom his roommate introduced suddenly grabbed his hand and exclaimed, "Ricky, I want to introduce you to a girl." He didn't remember her name, but he was annoyed that she forgot his name, especially since she felt entitled to introduce him to someone. At the same time, he said, "My name is not Ricky, but Ray." They pushed him by the hand towards the girl, and she said, "Mary, meet Ricky." The stranger also looked upset and corrected, "My name is not Mary, but Marilyn." And in this intersection of time and space, Ray was stunned to see the dark-haired beauty in front of him. He extended his hand for introduction. God, how did I not notice her before? He thought, peering at her. She was approximately 5 feet 10 inches tall, wearing a simple floral dress that nevertheless showed off her magnificent figure. She wore sandals on her feet so as not to embarrass the guys with her high heels. Ray suddenly realized that if she had been wearing heels, he would have been looking this mesmerizing girl straight in the eyes. Sea green eyes that threatened to rob him of his composure. Eyes you can dedicate your whole life to. As her warm, soft hand slipped into his, she gave him a radiant smile and shook her head, sending waves of long, silky, jet-black hair away from her face. "Hi, Ray, nice to meet you," she said. And to tell you the truth, Marilyn enjoyed meeting Ray too. She immediately regretted agreeing to come to the party. "Let's go, Mary, it will be fun." Her roommate convinced her. She was annoyed. For 3 days, she lived in a room with 3 other girls, and they still couldn't remember her name. But in the end, they convinced her to go, and it turned out to be just like high school. As soon as the guys saw how tall she was, they immediately turned away, saving their fragile egos. She was subjected to a series of subtle rejections as boys asked the girls around her to dance, but not her. She knew that despite her height, she was attractive and, more importantly, smart and eloquent. However, despite all this, she doubted that guys would give her a chance in college, just like they did in high school. But then a pleasant surprise happened. A very handsome guy looked at her with genuine interest. She smiled when he stuttered slightly while saying his name and corrected him by introducing herself. Instead of immediately making a joke about her height, Ray began asking obvious but important questions: where she was from, what department she was studying in, how she liked the university. But after his questions were satisfied, he continued to look at her with his green eyes, fixed on her with captivating attention. Marilyn realized that he desperately wanted to continue talking to her. This was an unknown sensation for her, and she enjoyed his attention. She noticed that Ray was annoyed at having to carry on a conversation over the noise at the party. He leaned towards her and said, "Would you like to go to Sally's and have a cup of coffee?" She smiled and immediately agreed. They emerged from the chaos of the party and began speaking in normal voices as they walked to the nearest coffee shop. They walked at a leisurely pace, and the topics of conversation smoothly replaced one another as they entered the cafe. Ray automatically pulled out a chair for her, and Marilyn sat down. It didn't even occur to him to worry that Marilyn might think he was a chauvinist, and Marilyn never felt for a second that Ray was treating her like a second-class person. The truth was that they instinctively felt comfortable around each other. The waitress who served them could have sworn that this couple was in a long-term relationship and did not meet just an hour ago. The smiles and laughter did not stop for a minute, and they completely ignored other customers until they were notified that the cafe was closing. As Ray walked Marilyn back to her dorm, he noticed that she shivered slightly from the cool night air. He quickly took off his jacket and threw it over her shoulders. Marilyn enthusiastically accepted this gesture for the first time in her life. She wore a guy's jacket. She had seen so many girls in high school wear their boyfriend's jackets as a symbol of affection and devotion. Now she hoped that she, too, had been marked. She was seized with instant panic. Lord, what if I imagined everything for myself? Maybe I should slow down so as not to scare him away. But Ray's constant gaze of interest as they walked under the light of the night lamps calmed her worries, and she wrapped herself more tightly in his jacket. Ray didn't care about the cold. His main attention was focused on the mesmerizing appearance of the girl walking next to him. All too quickly, they reached the dorm building, where their conversation came to an end. They both hesitated for a moment, unable to find a way to end the night. Ray desperately wanted to kiss her, but wasn't sure how Marilyn would react. He was focused on making Marilyn want to see him again. He knew he had to see her again. Marilyn hesitantly extended her hand, but deep down she hoped for more as she looked for the answer in his eyes. Ray shook her hand firmly, and in those short seconds when they fell silent, both, almost unconsciously, moved closer to each other and softly kissed, ending the evening. As Ray watched Marilyn disappear through the door of the building, he already felt a sharp longing for a new meeting. Marilyn entered her room, where her excited neighbors were already waiting for her. Marilyn, where did you go? You left without even saying where you were going." "Fine," thought Marilyn, "they finally remembered my name." Reluctantly, she took off Ray's jacket, but immediately hugged it to her and inhaled the smell. "Where did you get this?" asked one of the neighbors. She smiled happily and replied, "It was given to me by the man I will marry." Across campus, in Ray's room, a similar interrogation was taking place. "Damn, Ray, a minute ago you were here, and the next time I looked up, you were gone. Where have you gone?" Ray just grinned as his neighbor's questions escalated from curiosity to crude jokes. "Ray, if you managed to get a piece of this tall girl, I hope you prepared her for me, even if I have to take a stepladder," Henry jokes. "Yeah, Ray, I'd love to play periscope with those breasts of hers," Adam added, making obscene gestures with his hands. The room erupted in laughter, but soon everyone realized that Ray was not laughing. When silence finally reigned, Ray spoke. "Henry, Adam, you have been my friends since elementary school. If you want to keep it that way, don't ever say anything offensive about Marilyn again. Otherwise, I'll punch you in the face." The cold confidence with which Ray made the threat made it clear that the line had been drawn and should not be broken. The guys awkwardly went to bed. Ray could not fall asleep for a long time, replaying images of Marilyn in his memory. The next day in class, he was completely inattentive, moving from one lecture to another. Thank God, none of the professors called him to answer. It is impossible to predict what he would have revealed in his hazy state. Fortunately, the day ended and Ray found himself in a student cafe at an empty table. There was a phone in his hand, and he hesitated to dial the number. What if I scare her away? What if she will be happy about my call? Need a reason to call. How can I explain why I am calling? These and other thoughts raced through his head as he wavered between fear and desire. Why is this so damn hard? He thought before finally making up his mind and dialing Marilyn's number. At this time, Marilyn was trying to study in her room. Or rather, she pretended to be studying. All day her thoughts were occupied with the previous evening with Ray. She fell asleep hugging his jacket, enjoying the feeling of comfort and security that his scent on her skin brought her. What made me tell these girls that I had found the man to marry? She was worried. It was just one meeting, just a cup of coffee. How could I exaggerate everything so much? Am I really that desperate? Damn, I probably scared him so much that he's still running without looking back. But then, there was that kiss. This is a wonderful, tender spark of connection. It's an instinctive desire to continue. God, he felt it too, Marilyn thought, trying to concentrate on her English literature assignment. Suddenly, her phone beeped. Strange, it's not time for a weekly call to parents yet. She wasn't expecting a call from her roommates since they were at the end of the hallway visiting the other girls. "Hello?" she asked. Ray was instantly captivated by her voice, mentally imagining an image of Marilyn that matched that voice. In a panic, he realized that he had forgotten the prepared monologue he wanted to deliver. Hi, Marilyn. This is Ray. Ray Thompson. Since last night. We were drinking coffee." Ray winced, cursing himself. Idiot, how many other Rays had coffee with her last night? Nevertheless, he forced himself to continue. "I was wondering if you'd like to have coffee again." As soon as Marilyn heard his voice, she began to smile, and her smile became even wider after his invitation. "Ray, I would love to. Can I meet you where we were yesterday in half an hour?" "That would be great, Marilyn. I'll get us a table. See you." Her fear of Chaucer evaporated as she said goodbye and began to get ready. What a strange feeling dressing up for a guy. Soon she rushed out of the building and hurried to Sally's cafe. When she arrived, she looked around the crowd and noticed Ray standing up from his seat. As Marilyn approached, Ray noticed that she had put his jacket back on. "Damn, she looks much better on her than on me," he thought, following her movements towards the table. They smiled at each other, said hello, and the fear evaporated, giving way to casual conversation. Once again, they sat until closing, and Ray walked her across campus again. On the threshold of her dorm, Marilyn began to take off Ray's jacket. Ray told her to leave her, because tomorrow they had an appointment at Sully's so that he could help her understand Chaucer's Canterbury Tales. They'll probably be there again until closing time. This time they were less hesitant as they approached for a goodbye kiss. When their lips touched, Marilyn eagerly stole a second kiss and reluctantly said goodbye. Ray walked alone, trying to cope with his feelings, enjoying the taste of Marilyn's lipstick. Studying the next day led to another meeting, and then another. On Friday night, Marilyn and Ray attended a film noir symposium and shared popcorn, while watching Humphrey Bogart solve the crime and win the heart of Lauren Bacall. On Saturday, they went to a university football game together. The failure of the team could not spoil the joy of their communication. On Sunday, they went on a picnic with several friends. The next week was filled with studying together, and the weekend again gave them the opportunity to enjoy each other's company. This went on for several months, and Marilyn and Ray quietly became the core of their group of friends. They did not achieve this, it happened naturally. Their union gave stability to their company. Ray and Marilyn could only smile and laugh as their friends discussed their romantic adventures. No one needed to discuss Marilyn and Ray's relationship. Everything became clear after their sixth date on Friday night. When Ray said his roommates were away for the weekend supporting the football team at an away game, Marilyn suggested taking advantage of the situation. "Are you sure, Marilyn?" Ray asked as they looked at each other in the quiet dorm room. The significance of the upcoming event was stunning. Marilyn was nervous and almost ready to back down when Ray continued. "I want you to know that I've never done this before. I mean, I know how it goes from hearing other guys talk, but I want it to be perfect for you, Marilyn. I love you. I love you at first sight, and I will always love you. Regardless of whether you answer yes or no, I will still love you and will always be by your side. Ray's sincerity dispelled Marilyn's last doubts. She had heard so many horror stories from her neighbors about guys who confessed their love and then dumped them after one night. Now her boyfriend was not only the first to say the word love, but also gave her the opportunity to change her mind. All she had to do was refuse, and life would continue as before. But suddenly Marilyn realized what she wanted. She didn't want to look back on this moment in the future and regret it. She leaned over and kissed Ray softly, then began to undress. Ray watched nervously for a few seconds, and then awkwardly began to take off his clothes. When they were in their underwear, Marilyn climbed onto the narrow bed. Ray turned off the light and followed her. Kisses and blind touches ignited passion. Soon the underwear was thrown off, and the fire only intensified. Once on top of Marilyn, Ray groped for the entrance. Marilyn hesitated whether to help him, but suddenly everything worked out on its own. Her sigh confirmed to Ray that he had done everything right. Marilyn held her breath as his body slowly penetrated her. Discomfort, pain. Why did she agree to this? But soon the pressure eased and the pain subsided. Marilyn realized that her virginity was gone and allowed Ray to go deeper. Ray continued to whisper words of love to her, not noticing that Marilyn's tears had stopped flowing. Continuing clumsily, they awkwardly, but still found a common rhythm. Ray was filled with excitement from the warm sensation of being inside Marilyn. He finally found out what the mystery was. However, due to his excitement, he could not hold out for long. After only 5 minutes, he climaxed. Then, in the dark, he confessed his love to Marilyn again and again. Thanks to his youth and energy, Ray was able to achieve arousal 3 more times that night, and Marilyn readily responded to his needs. At dawn, Ray gently caressed Marilyn while she slept. When she woke up, her smile rewarded Ray and dispelled his worries. After that weekend, their first priority became their life together, and they began to build their relationship. Their friends were surprised that the couple did not at all look like ideal carbon copy partners. They argued about politics, discussed art, and they had different musical preferences. One friend said it best: "The only thing you have in common is each other." That was enough. Ray invited Marilyn home for Thanksgiving, enduring all the jokes and teasing as Marilyn charmed his family. At Christmas, he flew with her to her parents and withstood their strict inspection. Throughout their student years, they alternated holidays and vacations, spending them with one family or another, and soon became their own in both houses. So no one was surprised when, after graduation, Ray asked Marilyn to wait for him while he went to law school. She followed him and moved in with him, while Ray immersed himself in the Socratic method of legal education. When he passed the bar exam, both families gathered for a celebration, where Ray got down on one knee and proposed to Marilyn. Marilyn's father smiled at his daughter's enthusiastic agreement. Despite his old-fashioned ways and initial doubts about his daughter living with a man before marriage, he respected Ray for asking him for Marilyn's hand before he proposed. His daughter could have chosen a much worse man. "In sorrow and in joy, that's what I swore when I married Ray," Marilyn thought as they waited for the green light at the next traffic light. "I was so ready for joy, but when the time of grief came, I showed my true colors." Well, it's too late to turn back time, she thought bitterly. I lost him, and I have no one to blame but myself. The strangest thing is that I didn't even see it coming. It all started with small conversations in John's office. Then it grew into dinners together. From time to time, we would go for a drink after work. Oh, it was all quite innocent. More often than not, there were other people with us, and John never allowed himself to say or do anything inappropriate in private. He remained the one I could complain to, who would listen to me. He never tried to denigrate Ray when I talked about my pain and disappointment with Rachel. He always gave me good advice to keep in touch with Ray, but every day it became more and more difficult. And then there was that lunch when we found ourselves alone. I was having a particularly tough day and was on the verge of a breakdown. John took me to a quiet restaurant and listened to me all day. When it was time to leave, he took my hand, expressing sympathy, and before leaving, he hugged me to support me. Then I was happy that I had such a friend. Returning home, Marilyn pulled herself together and prepared to take care of Rachel. She and Ray agreed on one thing. Rachel always came first. Everything else faded into the background as soon as they crossed the threshold of the house. Ray did not return home until midnight that evening. She began to worry as early as 7 in the evening. He usually called if he was late at work. When Rachel asked where her dad was, Marilyn said that he was working late and would definitely stop by before bed. She called him, but every time it went to voicemail, leaving messages that were not answered. When he finally arrived in a taxi, Marilyn was furious. His suit was rumpled, and he reeked of whiskey. She began to scold him, trying not to raise her voice so as not to wake Rachel. Trying to keep his balance, Ray, despite his intoxication, directly asked if she was cheating on him with John Tullows. Without waiting for an answer, he went upstairs, lingered for a minute at Rachel's sleeping bed, and then locked himself in the guest bedroom. The next morning, Marilyn was preparing breakfast when a hungover Ray walked into the kitchen. She casually tossed a plate of food in front of him as a greeting. When he realized that there was no fork, knife, spoon, or even coffee in sight, he rose with a sigh and took care of everything himself. Sitting down at the table, he noticed how Marilyn was pointedly ignoring him, quickly chewing her food. When she finished, she noisily threw her plate into the sink and headed out. Already standing in the doorway, she turned around and asked, "You want to tell me what the hell happened yesterday?" Ray wasn't sure that an accusatory tone was better than silent disregard. Nevertheless, he replied, "Yesterday, while you were sitting comfortably at lunch with your boss, one of the senior partners saw you. He thought it would be interesting for me to know what my wife was doing. Imagine my surprise when I saw photos of my wife holding hands with another man, and especially the one where you hugged. Yes, it was just a great day." Dropping the sarcasm, Ray continued, "It was quite painful knowing that this idiot would show the photographs to all the partners of the firm and use them against me so that I would not become a partner. But the real blow was the realization that the woman I loved at first sight looked at another man the same way she once looked at me." The heartbreaking desperation in Ray's voice tore at Marilyn's heart as he continued, "So, I spent the rest of the day hiding in my office, not answering calls, not doing work. I just sat there and my world was turned upside down again. Ray, I'm sorry. I was having a hard day and John suggested we have lunch together. He is just a friend to me." All these touches were simply gestures of sympathy on his part. I was upset, and he kept saying, "I need to talk to you." Believe it or not, John tried his best to make me understand how much this hurt you too. Every time we talk, he asks how you are feeling. You don't have to be afraid of him, Ray. Most times he takes your side in every argument we have. At these words, Ray tensed up sharply. "Wait a minute. Are you telling me you're telling this guy what's going on in our family? You don't want to talk to me, but at the first opportunity you run to your boss and pour out your heart to him. What the hell are you talking about, Marilyn? Are you talking about me? About us?" The guilty look on Marilyn's face was all Ray needed. Before finishing his breakfast, he stood up, put his plate in the sink, and began to wash the dishes. Marilyn stood there, trying to think of something that wouldn't add fuel to the fire raging between them. Just as she opened her mouth to speak, Ray said, "I'll go to the office. Don't forget, we have a doctor's appointment for Rachel today at 3:30. I'll pick her up and we'll meet there." This was the end of the conversation. He joined the long list of unresolved problems that were growing between Marilyn and Ray. During the doctor's visit, a fragile truce was maintained. The good news was that the new medication was starting to show positive results for Rachel. When they returned home, they both tried to put on a semblance of normal life. Before going to bed, Marilyn asked Ray if he would come into the bedroom. Ray realized that she was asking him to return to their shared bed. They made love that night, and for the first time in their marriage, it felt like a commitment. When it was over, they both turned away from each other and were lost in their thoughts as the night slowly passed by. The light turned green and the car drove through the intersection. I should have known Marilyn wouldn't betray me, Ray thought, but I didn't give her a chance to explain. After that, it became easier and easier to move away from her. She begged me to listen to her, but my stupid pride spoiled everything, and now I have lost her. I think John now has a good chance of replacing me, especially after he played the knight on a white horse so well last Christmas. After a quarrel and a failed attempt at reconciliation, they began sleeping in separate bedrooms, despite Marilyn's requests to return. When Ray was finally ready to return, he heard that Marilyn was happy with the current state of affairs. Day after day, they led different lives. Rachel never noticed any problems between her parents. They continued to show her unity, unconditional love, and support as the cancer showed signs of remission and her strength was restored. Far from Rachel, the cold wall of Berlin grew, and each new insult turned into another brick in this bastion of hostility. One morning Ray came down to breakfast and was confronted by an angry Marilyn. "How dare you accuse me of cheating when you yourself are sleeping with this bitch whom you call your secretary?" Before Ray could say anything, Marilyn informed him that she had proof that he and Karen slept together. Then she ran out of the room. In fact, Marilyn only had a blonde hair on Ray's jacket, left after Karen hugged him in the morning, supporting him in a difficult moment. The irony was that now those same events had started a spiral leading to the collapse of their marriage. Now John Tullows and Karen Ferguson find themselves caught up in the situation. Gradually, as they watched their friends' marriages fall apart, they both began to develop feelings for them. However, neither John nor Karen took open steps towards rapprochement. They tried to remain a neutral support for their friends. But it became increasingly difficult to suppress my emotions and not imagine myself in the place of the spouses Ray and Marilyn. After all, they both knew that until the situation with Rachel was resolved, neither Ray nor Marilyn would be ready for a divorce, and the carousel continued to rotate according to the will of fate. Another Christmas, another birthday, another disappointment for Rachel at not seeing a white Christmas again. The gifts surrounding her softened the resentment of the lack of snow. As Ray and Marilyn took turns handing gifts to their daughter, Marilyn noticed Ray tense as he looked at one of the boxes. Then he put on a mask of false happiness and continued handing out gifts. After so many years of marriage, Marilyn learned to notice changes in her husband's mood. When they were alone, she asked, "What's happened?" "Your boyfriend," Ray hissed. "You let your boyfriend send my daughter a gift?" Without waiting for an answer, he went to Rachel's room and began to admire her gifts, including the one from John Tullows. When the guests had left and the house was empty, Ray went to his bedroom, desperately trying to find a way out of the situation. Marilyn stayed in Rachel's room, lying next to her daughter and watching her sleep, wondering what the future would bring. What it brought was indifference. People make the mistake of thinking that hate is the opposite of love. This is wrong. The opposite of love is indifference, when you no longer care about the actions of another person. At least with hate, you are still making someone emotional. But when someone becomes indifferent to you, when you no longer affect the other person, that is the exact opposite of love. Gradually, the indifference grew as the couple continued to care for Rachel. John grew closer to Marilyn, and Karen grew closer to Ray. And although both fell into emotional infidelity, neither of them was ready to cross the line of physical infidelity. Both Ray and Marilyn still felt like they had one last connection until they officially broke it off. This shouldn't have happened in front of Rachel. It was impossible to destroy her childhood, her life. Not after everything that has already happened to her. Marilyn and Ray were determined to live together unhappily if it meant Rachel would be alive and happy. Another year has passed, and yet another wish for a white Christmas has yet to come true. New Christmas gifts have appeared, including from John Tullows. Ray made no objection. Time continued to move inexorably forward. From time to time, Ray or Marilyn tried to mend the relationship. But call it fate, bad timing, or bruised egos, nothing sparked the same fire within them. They now lived as roommates who shared the same goal of caring for and caring for Rachel. They were polite to each other and acted like a loving couple in front of Rachel and their friends and family, only to drop that mask when they were alone. Another Christmas, and they were once again waiting for Rachel's annual wish for a white Christmas. But this time she surprised them. Her Christmas wish was for the Christmas lights to stay on. Tears welled in Marilyn and Ray's eyes as they promised to keep the Christmas lights on for Rachel. The smile on the exhausted child's face sealed that promise. So Christmas lights began to burn around the clock in the Thompson family home. Ray and Marilyn soon began to hear complaints from neighbors when the lights continued to burn in late January. In February, the Homeowners Association sent them a notice demanding they turn off and remove their Christmas lights. Ray promised Marilyn he would look into it and pulled out the HOA rules to review the many bylaws again. First, he sent a letter asking for an exception for their sick child. This request was immediately denied, and they now have a demand from the HOA's legal representative. Ray called the lawyer, but he was adamant. The Christmas lights had to be turned off, or there would be a trial. Every day Ray told Marilyn about the situation, and she began to get irritated, blaming Ray for his inability to resolve the problem. But Ray continued to fight to fulfill his daughter's wish, and the lights continued to burn in the Thompson house around the clock. A certified letter was sent to the Thompsons, informing them that the HOA rules had been violated and that legal action was being filed. Marilyn continued to insist that Ray was not doing everything he could, even though he filed a petition after another. She shared her frustrations with John during one of their daily lunches. "He doesn't do anything, John. All I hear is that he filed this motion or that motion, that the hearing was adjourned, or that the matter was being considered. All I need to hear from him is that he solved the problem and that my daughter can enjoy her Christmas lights. Marilyn, I'm sure Ray is doing everything he can to resolve this legally, but sometimes it's better to go the other way. I have a friend on a local TV channel. If you want, I can try to interest him in this story. Perhaps we can shame them into withdrawing their lawsuit." "Oh, John, thank you," Marilyn exclaimed and impulsively kissed him. After an awkward pause, she muttered, "Sorry, John. I shouldn't have done this. At least while I'm married to Ray, I have to be faithful." Her sentence was cut short, and John took advantage of the moment. "But what then, Marilyn? You know how I feel about you. You can't spend your whole life chained to a person you feel nothing for. You deserve happiness. I can make you happy, and I am ready to wait until you give me a chance." Marilyn was stunned by the confession. Yes, he and John had hinted at this more than once, but now everything had been said openly, and it could not be ignored. "John, this is all too fast. I really care about you and want to be happy, but given the current circumstances, when can I change anything? For now, let's focus on your friend from the TV channel and solve this problem." With these words, she hugged him, and John enjoyed her hug. Across town, Karen was hugging Ray. "Congratulations, Ray. I knew you would find a solution to this problem." Ray was stunned when Karen reached out and kissed him. "No, boss. I've waited too long for this moment, and I won't let you go," she started, squeezing him tighter and kissing him again. She also pressed her hips slightly, encouraging his body to respond to her. Reluctantly, Ray pulled away. "Karen, I need to stop and call Marilyn. She will be so happy to know that the judge dismissed the lawsuit. I told her that my petition would be enough to stop this case. The association will now have to make rule changes so they can regulate Christmas lights in the future." Karen was in the middle of answering when the intercom on Ray's desk rang. Automatically, she picked up the phone and announced, "Ray Thompson's office." Just a few seconds passed, her brows furrowed, and she said, "Yes, Mr. Fletcher, here is Mr. Thompson." With these words, she handed the phone to Ray, who wondered why the senior partner was calling him. "Thompson, Channel 8 is about to release a story that you need to watch, and then come to my office." Before Ray could answer, Mr. Fletcher hung up. Puzzled, he turned on the TV in his office and started watching commercials. Finally, the local news started, and Ray and Karen watched as the attractive anchor announced, And now, as we promised before the commercial, we have a story about a little girl who is fighting cancer. On her birthday, she made a wish that the Christmas lights would continue to burn in her house. The problem is that her neighborhood is full of Grinches. Here's Neil Sullivan with this story. The screen showed a view of the Thompson family's living room where Marilyn nervously awaited her interview. Next to her was John Tullos. "Thank you, Sonia. I'm here with Mrs. Marilyn Thompson, whose daughter Rachel is being treated for leukemia. Rachel's birthday falls on Christmas Day. This Christmas, her wish was for the Christmas lights in her house to stay on. This wish comes true thanks to a very determined mother who is ready to fight her entire neighborhood." Stunned, Ray continued to watch his wife being interviewed by a reporter. She explained in detail why she decided to make the situation public. When the reporter asked what her husband thought about what was happening, Marilyn shivered uncomfortably and said, "He's doing everything he can, but it wasn't enough to resolve the situation. That's why I decided to listen to my friend John and talk about it publicly. Maybe if people let our housing committee know what they think about this, my daughter can continue to enjoy Christmas lights." After the reporter finished talking to Marilyn, he began asking questions of John Tullos, who introduced himself as a family friend. "Neil, I just want Rachel to be happy and to help my friend Marilyn in any way I can." Ray turned off the TV and then threw the remote at the wall, breaking it into small pieces. He ran out of Mr. Fletcher's office and left Karen to collect the pieces for the trash can. That evening, an anxious Marilyn eagerly awaited Ray's return home. Finally, around 9 o'clock in the evening, she heard his car drive into the garage. When the door opened, she exclaimed, "Ray, where have you been? I have the most wonderful news. I was interviewed on television today about Rachel and told everyone what the association was trying to do. The interview has already been posted on their website, and the link already has 100,000 views. People are hanging up their phones and flooding the association's website with angry messages about their actions. What do you think about this?" Indifferent, Ray continued to move around the room, looking at everything except his wife. Marilyn could not understand his indifferent behavior. "Ray, did you hear what I said? We were finally able to put pressure on the association to drop the lawsuit." Ray stopped at the bar and poured himself a drink. After swallowing his first sip of smooth bourbon, he turned to Marilyn. "Yes, Marilyn, I heard you. Congratulations. The only problem is that the lawsuit is no longer there." With these indifferent words, he took from his jacket pocket several sheets of legal paper folded in half and threw them on the coffee table in front of Marilyn. He casually waved his hand with the glass towards the papers. "This is a copy of the order signed by the judge and filed this morning dismissing the case." He took another sip and looked thoughtfully at the glass. "By the time your interview came out, I had already won the case. Anyway, thanks for your vote of confidence. I couldn't have done it without your support." He took another sip of his bourbon. "It was a really wonderful surprise to see you on TV and hear you basically tell the whole world that I'm not doing enough for my child." Marilyn said with tears in her voice, "Ray, that's not what I meant." Ray waved his hand wearily, looking away. "I know, Marilyn, I know. You couldn't rely on me. Thank God your boyfriend was able to help you out." Ray stood up and poured himself another drink. "Funny thing, you didn't hear about the consequences of your interview. Immediately after his release, the senior partner called me. It turns out he got a call from the owner and manager of Channel 12. I guess you didn't know that Channel 12 is one of our clients." He smiled weakly. "They really didn't like that their main competitor, Channel 8, beat them to it with a local story about the family of a lawyer they were keeping on retainer." He shook his head. "So, naturally, Mr. Fletcher gave me a motivational talk and discussed whether I would be working next month. You can imagine how pleased I was with my prospects. So, I invited Karen to have a drink with me to celebrate. Nothing special. It's just the two of us, like you and old Johnny with your dinners. I think you're onto something, Marilyn. I had a great time with Karen thinking about which law firms I should start sending my resume to." Ray ignored Marilyn's tears as he finished his drink and prepared to go upstairs. "Thank you, Marilyn, for embarrassing me in front of the world. Watching you and John sitting in my house on my couch, talking about my child, it couldn't get any better." Before starting to climb the stairs, he struck one last blow. "Let me know when the Channel 8 website gets 1 million views. This will teach them not to mess with you." This scene became one of the links in the chain of events that led to the collapse of their relationship. Now they were both looking for solace on the side, outside of marital ties. However, despite the temptations, none of them could bring themselves to cheat on their spouse. Several times, both Karen and John found themselves in situations where Ray and Marilyn attacked them with accusations of trying to speed up the inevitable. This forced the potential family destroyers to temporarily retreat, but like a natural disaster, they returned again and continued to drag Ray and Marilyn into their networks. At the same time, the situation at home between the spouses became less tense. It seemed that they had already tacitly admitted that their marriage was dead, and all the previous resentments and tensions had disappeared somewhere. They continued to maintain the appearance of a normal family to friends and relatives. They were especially careful with Rachel, trying to maintain the illusion of a loving mom and dad. But from time to time, their daughter still managed to ask uncomfortable questions. "Mom, why don't you and Dad sleep in the same room anymore?" The question, asked suddenly, made Marilyn freeze. Should she lie, tell in white lie, or destroy your daughter's trust and explain that Mom and Dad no longer love each other? "Honey, we don't sleep together because we both want to be close to your room if you need anything." This answer seemed to satisfy Rachel, but then she added, "And Dad said it's because you snored all night." "Actually, honey, it's your dad who snores." Marilyn leaned back and snored loudly, exaggeratedly, imitating Ray. This made Rachel giggle and then laugh out loud at the ridiculous sound. She reached out to her mother, and Marilyn held her close, gently rocking the most precious thing in her life. How long can they maintain this illusion? What will she do when Rachel's world falls apart? How can she heal this pain? Marilyn didn't know the answers to these questions, and so their daily routine continued. Rachel remained at the center of their world. All events were coordinated, but with the caveat that from time to time one of the parents suddenly turned out to be delayed or busy. No questions were asked, no answers were required. The names of John or Karen, even if they came up, caused only slight irritation in the offended spouse, and time passed. One of the most cherished rituals was reading to Rachel at night. Over time, favorite books were replaced by more age-appropriate works. Now they were reading Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. The book had been read before, as had the next two in the series, but Rachel didn't like the direction the story was taking, so she asked to reread the first book. In better times, both Ray and Marilyn took turns reading to their daughter, imitating the characters' voices to her delight. This rarely happens now, but sometimes, at Rachel's request, both parents still came to her, and for a moment, thanks to her smile, their problems disappeared. One evening, Rachel asked them both to read to her. As they settled into their chairs, they noticed a large sheet of paper folded in several pages ahead. "My girl, are you feeling well?" Marilyn asked, placing her hand on her daughter's forehead. "Ray, she has a fever. Maybe we should take her to the hospital." "No, Mom, I feel fine. I don't want to go to the hospital. Please just read to me." Fever was not uncommon for Rachel. Her body often struggled with infections and side effects from various medications. Eventually, she persuaded her parents to continue reading. But as they read, Rachel became less and less active, her participation in the story fading. Suddenly, her body began to shake and convulsions began. Rachel's eyes rolled back into her head, and Ray scooped her up into his arms. Marilyn screamed, dropping the book on the floor, and rushed to her husband to help her daughter. With trembling hands, Marilyn pulled the phone out of her pocket to call an ambulance. Ray rushed downstairs to the kitchen to get all the ice out of the freezer and try to bring down his daughter's fever. It seemed like an eternity passed before the ambulance arrived. The paramedics quickly and professionally secured Rachel onto the gurney and carried her to the ambulance, which stood with its lights flashing in the night. All the neighbors came outside, attracted by what was happening, while Marilyn and Ray followed the orderlies as they loaded Rachel into the car. Marilyn hurried to get inside to stay with her daughter. Ray rushed to his car, started the engine, and drove after the ambulance as the siren began to howl shrilly in the air. He stayed directly behind the ambulance with his vehicle's hazard lights on. Making his way through intersections and adjusting to the speed of the ambulance, Ray was not going to lose sight of her for a second. They arrived at the hospital emergency room, and Ray ignored the orderly's request to park the car in the parking lot. He ran out of the car and rushed after the gurney. Marilyn cried and ran next to the gurney until they reached the hallway and came to the double doors. At that moment, the nurse told them to stop and directed them to the waiting room, and the gurney disappeared from their sight. Like obedient sheep, they obeyed the order and sat next to each other, silently awaiting news of what had struck their daughter. A few minutes later, a hospital security officer entered the room and reminded Ray to move the car. He got out, parked the car in the parking lot, and hurried back to the waiting room. Once again, he sat down next to Marilyn, and they continued to watch the endlessly slow movement of the hands of the wall clock, hoping and desperately waiting for news. The doors opened, and a gloomy young man in a surgical suit approached them. "No, no, no, no," Marilyn repeated mentally like a mantra as he approached. "Mr. and Mrs. Thompson, I'm Dr. Carter. I took care of Rachel. I want to let you know what's going on. We managed to bring down the temperature, and now it is stable. She will soon be transferred to a ward. As far as we can tell, leukemia and all its drugs have worn down her body so much that her immune system can no longer cope. We are contacting her oncologist and all other treating physicians to obtain complete information about her medical history. Once this happens, we can create a treatment plan. The nurse will come out soon and take you to Rachel's room." As he turned to leave, Ray struggled to ask the question he had been dreading. "Doctor, will she be okay?" The exhausted doctor just looked at him tiredly and disappeared behind the doors again, heading to the next patient. Ray and Marilyn sat back in their chairs, fully aware of the significance of the doctor's refusal to give a reassuring answer. Rachel clung to life for another 11 days. Marilyn and Ray took turns watching her bedside around the clock. They took turns sleeping in the hospital bed while the other stayed awake and watched over their daughter. The only time they left the room was to go home, shower, change clothes, and eat. They resolved work issues over the phone in hushed voices, trying not to disturb each other. Most communication was via text messages, which added a bit of privacy. Relatives began to come from all over the country to support them. Everyone tried to persuade Ray and Marilyn to rest and let one of their family sit with Rachel, but they both categorically refused. They remained in the room, silently watching their daughter, to whom IVs and numerous machines with indicators were connected. They watched as Rachel struggled to draw air from her frail body despite being intubated. Day by day, Rachel faded away, and secretly Ray and Marilyn began to pray for her suffering to end. Finally, a team of doctors approached them and informed them that all medical options had been exhausted. In their opinion, the time has come to turn off the devices. Ray and Marilyn looked at each other and nodded slowly before bending down and sobbing. Having signed the necessary documents, they, along with the assembled relatives, held hands and watched as the devices turned off one by one and Rachel slowly passed into eternity. Warm, golden sunlight filtered into the quiet hospital room, broken only by the occasional sob, as Rachel took her last breath at 6:14 am. Inconsolable grandparents hugged their children, mourning their shared loss. No one noticed that Ray and Marilyn hugged only formally before going their separate ways to other relatives. Plans were spontaneously made to gather at Marilyn's parents' house to discuss the funeral. Ray's parents took them home. When Ray entered the house, he noticed that the Christmas lights were still on in broad daylight, and, as if to mark the end, he turned them off. The rest of the week passed in a blur as Marilyn and Ray made all the arrangements. The obituary, the casket, the cemetery, the priest, the music, the date and time of the memorial service, and the funeral. Marilyn and Ray seemed to sleepwalk for the next few days as their home was flooded with food, flowers, wreaths, condolence cards, and visitors. They tried to move to give each other some privacy. This temporary system worked until the day of the funeral service arrived. Once again, Ray's parents drove them to the farewell site. Inside, Marilyn and Ray went their separate ways, beginning the awkward process of interacting with the guests. Ray didn't understand why so many people insisted that he go to the coffin and look at Rachel. This was not his daughter. Her smile, her charm, her spark, her soul, they were somewhere else. There was only an empty shell left here. However, he persevered through the process. Ray noticed John Tullows approach Marilyn, and she stood up to hug him tightly. Ray continued to watch as they talked for a long time, not releasing their embrace and looking into each other's eyes. Apparently, they felt his gaze because they both simultaneously looked in his direction and hastily opened their embrace. Ray wondered why they were pretending to grow apart in the first place. After all, he thought, isn't this the man she wants to be with? For a moment, John Tullows looked like he was about to approach Ray. You've got to be kidding me, Ray thought. However, apparently John changed his mind and left the building. This left Ray with the eternal question, what would he do if John did approach him? The answer was purely theoretical and split evenly between accepting condolences and beating him to a pulp. When they returned home that night, Marilyn and Ray automatically went to their own bedrooms. Only one day left to participate in this farce, and then Marilyn will declare her independence, Ray thought sadly, undressing before going to bed. Marilyn paced around her room, debating whether to knock on Ray's door and try to talk to him again, trying to make him understand what she was going through. When she finally made up her mind, she went out into the corridor and noticed that the light in Ray's room had already been turned off. She returned to her room and closed the door. There were many friends and acquaintances of Marilyn and Ray at the funeral service. The priest made a heartfelt speech, and the music set the right tone. The coffin was surrounded by rows of flowers. Then it was time for a final farewell as mourners slowly filed past the family. It's time for the family to say goodbye to Rachel one last time. As Marilyn approached the elaborate coffin, her legs weakened. Oh God, they will close this coffin and bury my little girl. No parent should have to bury their child, she thought. As she staggered, her father grabbed her hand, and Ray supported her on the other side, preventing her from falling. Looking at his sad, imperturbable face, she gathered the last of her courage and said goodbye to her baby. She was then taken outside and placed in a limousine, which took her and Ray to the burial site. Last words and prayers were said. Several of the pallbearers placed their boutonnieres on the coffin lid and walked past. Then people began to leave, and in the crowd, Marilyn saw Ray being hugged by Karen Ferguson. Marilyn thought bitterly, why didn't she wake up Ray last night and talk to him? Is she destined to live her life with two holes in her heart because of the people she lost? With that, it all came back to the present moment as the limousine turned down the last street in their neighborhood to take the Thompsons to their home. A long black car pulled into the driveway. The driver turned off the engine, got out of the car, walked around it, and opened the back door for the couple. Before leaving, he expressed condolences on behalf of the funeral home. Ray and Marilyn Thompson remained standing, squinting into the bright sunlight, preparing to enter the empty house and pick up the pieces of their shattered lives. The silence in the house reinforced the emptiness that settled there. Ray and Marilyn wandered aimlessly around the house. They still didn't talk to each other. Perhaps it was the internal grief they were both coping with. Perhaps it was the fear that the next conversation would be the first step towards an irreversible end to their marriage. They both felt it was inevitable, but neither wanted to deal with it today. Not on the day they said goodbye to their daughter. Both suspected that friends or relatives would soon come to support them during this difficult time. All they had to do was wait a little longer to distract themselves and save the final conversation for another day. Marilyn decided to go upstairs and wait for the guests there. Ray stood in the hallway, looking at the family photographs on the wall, documenting their lives. He sank deeper and deeper into melancholy, looking from one photograph to another. I wonder if Karen will want to have kids right away, he thought. No, a heartbreaking scream from above echoed down, forcing Ray to jump out of his seat. He flew up the stairs as another mournful cry echoed through the house. No. The scream continued beyond the limits of human endurance, and pain pierced Ray's heart as he ran towards the source of the sound. There, on the floor of Rachel's room, lay the collapsed figure of Marilyn, sobbing inconsolably as a third painful scream escaped from her chest. Ray was filled with horror at this sight. He realized that neither he nor Marilyn had given free rein to their true emotions during Rachel's funeral, and now it hit Marilyn with a vengeance. He sank to the floor next to his wife, desperately trying to find a way to comfort her by hugging her and holding her close. Our baby, Marilyn continued to sob, shuddering in his arms. The house still echoed with her painful cries as she freed her soul from this unbearable pain. After an eternity, Ray noticed that Marilyn had something clutched in her hand. When he focused his gaze, he saw a primal look in her eyes, a look full of pain, despair, and pleading. A look that begged for release, for forgiveness, as she slowly unclenched her hand to reveal the piece of paper clutched in it. Stunned, Ray stared at the paper Marilyn handed him. It became clear to him what had happened. During those days in the hospital, neither Marilyn nor Ray cleaned Rachel's room after she began to twitch convulsively. None of them wanted to disturb the aura of the room for fear of incurring even greater trouble, as if it helped them. Now Marilyn, to occupy her time, decided to clean up Rachel's room and made her discovery by picking up a book about Harry Potter, and the paper Rachel had marked in the book came out so she could pick it up. Ray studied a crude pencil drawing of figures with inscriptions. Here is the house, a large figurine with the inscription Dad. The slightly smaller figure had Mom written on it. Following them were two small figures. One said Sister and the other Brother. A figure with golden wings and a halo on which was simply written, I looked down at them from the cloud. Now the full force of Marilyn's sadness hit Ray, and the smiling figures burned into his soul. Over the course of 5 years, they began to mentally prepare for this. For 5 years, day after day, they defended themselves. Now the emotional dam, strengthened over the past 5 years, broke as he joined the grieving Marilyn. They remained curled up on the floor of Rachel's bedroom, pressed against each other, and time stood still for them as the phone calls, text messages, doorbells, and knocks on the door faded into insignificance. The afternoon sun faded into twilight, and they continued to hold each other silently. Finally, as darkness fell into the room, Ray heard Marilyn's voice. In a soft, timid voice, laced with fear and uncertainty, she said, Ray, is it over for us? Is there any way to become us again? I lost Rachel. If I lose you, I will have no reason to live. Is there still a we? In response, Ray stood up, pulled his beautiful wife to her feet, and, holding her hand, led her blindly down the stairs. They stood against the wall by the front door for a moment, just holding each other. And so it happened that late spring night in the Thompson house, Christmas lights suddenly flashed brightly, testifying to love. Ray led Marilyn upstairs to their bedroom. It dawned on Ray as he began to kiss Marilyn tenderly. He returned to their bedroom, where he belonged. He belonged to them, and she belonged to them, and at that moment nothing else mattered except the woman who had captured him all those years ago. His lips eagerly tried to introduce Marilyn to his friends after a long absence. Her body pressed against his, and the encounter was both reassuring and exciting as their hands began to claim their mate again. Marilyn moaned as he kissed her, and his hand briefly touched her breast. Over the years, Ray discovered how much Marilyn liked to be touched there. He was determined tonight and forever after to serve the woman he loved, and he began to softly kiss Marilyn's earlobe, which elicited a pleasant sigh as Marilyn enjoyed the electric sensation. Marilyn's hands touched Ray's torso as she caressed him, returning kiss after kiss to her partner. Her hands slid over his chest as she took in his body. For 10 years she had had access to this wonderful man, and now she wanted to make up for the recent unpleasant period they had gone through. Ray was delighted with Marilyn's signal. He didn't want Marilyn to admire anything anymore. Take her with brute force and prove once again that he belongs to her and only her, that she belonged to him and him alone. But his love for Marilyn was deeply rooted in his desire to please her, to show her that she was everything to him and always would be. Marilyn answered his unspoken signal, and they both began to undress each other. After many years of practice, they could still follow the process and receive pleasure and awe from the sight of their naked flesh, which was smothered by attention, caresses, and kisses. Finally, in the dim light of their bedroom, the couple shed their clothes and instincts, and nature demanded their copulation. But both had other plans. They were no longer college students infatuated with each other. Over the years, they have grown together, finding out what made the other tick, which made their significant other happy, and they intended to put this into practice. Ray slowly approached Marilyn's graceful body, kneeling as if honoring his muse. He pressed his face to her sides, enjoying her scent, which he missed so much. He rushed towards her stomach, and Marilyn supported him, hugging his head with her hands. Gentle touches, affectionate kisses, and gradual rapprochement. Marilyn felt a desire for attention, but Ray had a thoughtful strategy. The attention from others only heightened her anticipation, and she quietly begged Ray to give her his care and attention. As he got closer, Ray noticed how Marilyn's breathing changed under his touch. Her shoulders shook, and her knees could barely keep her on her feet. A quiet, shaky sigh escaped her lips as he continued his caresses, completely focused on her reaction. Marilyn sat down on the bed, allowing him to continue. Ray did not need any hints. Years of intimacy and trust taught him to understand every movement, every hint in her gaze. He led them forward confidently and gently, taking his time, enjoying every moment. "Oh, Ray," Marilyn whispered, her voice trembling with the emotions overwhelming her. She clutched his shoulders tighter as the tension reached its peak, and a wave of pleasure washed over her completely. The silence of the room was filled only by their ragged breathing. Ray raised his head and smiled at Marilyn, whose eyes were closed and an expression of complete bliss was frozen on her face. At that moment, the whole world for them narrowed to this room, to this moment. She purred softly, like a contented kitten, as Ray continued to enjoy the moment of intimacy after her trembling gradually subsided. Then he began to slowly climb up her body, and Marilyn, with a smile, prepared to respond to him with tenderness. However, Ray gently stopped her, looking into her eyes and whispering, "Darling, too much time has passed. I really need you." These words made Marilyn's heart flutter. She hugged him tighter, completely surrendering to their long-awaited union. At first, Ray was worried that he wouldn't last as long as the first time they made love. So much time had passed, and he was devoid of Marilyn's charm as he slid into the warm, cozy embrace of his woman. Marilyn sighed, feeling a deep intimacy with Ray. She pressed her hands to his face and kissed him tenderly, expressing gratitude for this moment. Their movements merged into a single rhythm, like a melody performed in harmony. Warmth and tenderness intertwined, creating an invisible connection between them. There was understanding in their glances and care and love in every touch. At some point, the pace of their interaction quickened, as if they had reached a climax in their harmony. Marilyn closed her eyes, feeling their hearts beating in unison and their breaths merging into one. Ray hugged her tighter, as if he was afraid to let go of this moment. Their bodies were relaxed, but filled with pleasant fatigue and a feeling of complete satisfaction. For some time, they just lay next to each other, enjoying each other's warmth. Marilyn smiled, sliding her fingers along Ray's cheek, and he, in turn, softly kissed her forehead. In the silence, interrupted only by their breathing, they knew that this moment would forever remain in their memory. As soon as he was next to her, they began to gently caress each other after intimacy. Ray began to kiss Marilyn's face and felt that she was crying, first feeling a tear on his lips and then tasting a salty drop. "Marilyn, what happened?" "Ray, forgive me. Sorry. Please forgive me. I should never have moved away from you. You are the only person in the world for me." Marilyn began to kiss Ray passionately, trying to convince him of her sincerity. Ray reciprocated, kissing and caressing every part of Marilyn he could reach. "Oh, Marilyn, my beautiful woman, it is I who should apologize to you. I let my ego get in the way, shutting you off and not giving you a chance to talk to me. I allowed my resentments to fester and moved further and further away. I can't believe I almost lost you, losing Rachel and then you." Marilyn listened while Ray struggled to articulate his innermost thoughts. Gathering his strength, he continued, "I would be lost without you, Marilyn. You have always owned my heart, and if you left, my soul would be devastated. And it would only be my fault." Marilyn interrupted him. "No, dear, it's my fault. I let John take the place that should have been yours. Although I never physically cheated on you, I cheated on you, Ray. I allowed him to fill an emotional void that should have been only for you. How can you tolerate me after what I did to you?" With us, Marilyn hugged Ray as tightly as she could. Ray responded with a hug that threatened to crush her. "Marilyn, dear, we are both to blame for allowing the situation to go this far. We were so focused on Rachel that we forgot about us. We tried so hard to keep her here that we didn't notice how it was affecting both of us. Ray, how do we get back to where we need to be?" "I will do anything for you," Marilyn exclaimed. At that moment, the doorbell rang, and Marilyn automatically began to get dressed to open it. But Ray grabbed her hand and said, "The first thing we will do is forget about the world around us. This time is just for us, and nothing should come between us." They ignored phone calls and knocked on the door, making love all night. Slow, sensual love. Not the hasty awkwardness of their first intimacy, not the passionate obsession of the honeymoon, but a love that brings satisfaction and peace to two people who have vowed to be together forever. That night, they rediscovered their love. At dawn, they left the house, leaving the key under the rug. After sending messages to both sets of parents, they headed to the airport. Soon, they were standing in front of an electronic flight board and choosing a direction. They walked up to the check-in counter, presented their passports and credit cards, and flew away lightly with just their clothes and no emotional baggage, and they disappeared for 3 weeks. John Tullos was disturbed by the series of events. For 3 weeks after the funeral, he tried to contact Marilyn through voicemails and text messages. She didn't answer any of them. A week later, John granted Marilyn compassionate leave, backdated to the first week. He left the end date open, but sooner or later he would have to discuss it with his superiors. "Doesn't she understand the position she's putting me in? Why doesn't she call to explain what's going on?" John thought. "Maybe she's clearing the way for her to be with me," he thought hopefully. And suddenly there was a knock on the door. "John, can I come in?" A tanned, rested, and peaceful Marilyn smoothly entered the office. She sat down opposite him at the table. "Marilyn," he muttered happily and jumped up to hug and kiss her. But Marilyn raised her hand sharply, stopping him. "No, John, you don't need to do this," she warned and motioned for him to sit down. "I came to submit my resignation. I understand that this will put you in an awkward position, but there is nothing I can do about it. I'm willing to stay for a while to bring my replacement up to speed, but I think you've already found someone to take my place." "What the hell, Marilyn? You show up after being away for 3 weeks and immediately announce your resignation. What about us, Marilyn? Have you forgotten what connected us?" "John, nothing really connected us. You were there when I needed an emotional anchor, and I will always appreciate that. But I loved and loved only one man, my husband. Trying to start a relationship with you would be a betrayal of him, you and myself. You deserve so much more than I can give you, John. Ray will always own my heart and soul, and you will always come second." Marilyn looked at him with sympathy. "I'm leaving because I don't want to remind you of what could have been. I almost lost the only thing that is truly dear to me. Ray and I have a second chance, and I have to take it. And here, next to you, it would be too easy for me to fall into a trap again." Marilyn stood up and extended her hand to him. "Goodbye, John." John desperately squeezed her hand, as if trying to hold her back. "Marilyn, we can fix everything." But she gently released her hand and, without looking back, left the office. With that, she ignored his remark, slipped out of his hand, and walked out the door out of his life. On the other side of town, Ray sat quietly in a conference room where all the law firm's partners were present, ready to teach a good lesson to the brazen young lawyer who had dared to disappear for 3 weeks and hoped to avoid consequences. Once the hearing was open, Ray became the lawyer that would make him famous throughout the state. He did not allow the tribunal to go on the offensive. Instead, he began to list the many grievances and injustices that he had to endure while working for this company. He then presented a list of clients he had brought to the firm, then a list of existing clients that he dealt with on a regular basis. It soon became clear to everyone in the room that Ray held the cards, and any talk of punishment would have to be put aside for the good of the firm. But Ray had no intention of stopping. He sought and obtained commitments to partner status for himself and 3 other employees who performed the bulk of the work in the office. By the time he left the conference room, the fate of the elderly leeches, who had not brought any benefit to the company for years, was a foregone conclusion. Ray was already imagining himself in Charles Fletcher's office when Karen Ferguson ran up to him and exclaimed, "Congratulations, dear. I was so afraid that you would be fired. Now we can start our family." Ray looked sadly at the excited, beautiful secretary and said, "Karen, we need to talk." And slowly he freed himself from her embrace. Has it really been 9 years already? Ray thought, watching the chaos unfold in his house. Brightly colored wrapping paper flew through the air as the last of the gifts were unwrapped by the twins. Through the joyful cries of the gifts received and the bargaining that had already begun between his daughter and son, he continued to be content with the spectacle. Next to him was Marilyn, who put her hand in his and kissed him as a sign of gratitude for the expensive gift and emerald necklace. "You spent too much on me again, Ray." "I'll have to pay you back tonight," Marilyn warned him, clinging to him. Yes, Ray thought, this will never be a problem for me. He wondered what she had in store for him, but he already knew that he would like it. In the chaos of their once perfect living room, Kobo, their golden retriever, unwittingly approached Charlie, the Siamese cat who was perched on the arm of the sofa. With lightning speed, Charlie slammed his paw onto Kobo's sensitive nose and jumped down to the floor through piles of wrapping paper and boxes. Kobo barked and rushed after the cunning cat, and the twins ran after them, squealing and laughing, adding noise to the general cacophony of sounds in the house. With ease, Charlie jumped onto the kitchen table, finding refuge from the angry dog, who continued to bark, while the unfazed cat began to wash himself, enjoying his Christmas gift, the injured dog. "Okay, kids, it's time to get ready." "Go change," Marilyn announced. Ray drove his family into the cold gray morning to a familiar meeting place. On the way, he and Marilyn became lost in their thoughts. The melancholy of this journey passed by the twins, who continued their long-standing argument. "You must listen to me because I'm older than you," Carla said to her brother, who was unlucky enough to be born 30 minutes later. Using the only logic available to a 7-year-old, Paul replied, "It's not true." The argument continued in this vein until the twins turned to their final arbiter and asked their mother which of them was right. Showing the wisdom of Solomon, Marilyn decided that they were both right, and the main thing was to love each other. The argument was settled, and the children moved on to another conversation. Ray thought again, 9 years. So much has happened. Marilyn opened her own graphic design agency, and from the very beginning, she could only choose projects that inspired her. Ray continued to dominate the law firm and soon achieved the adoption of a merit-based system of promotions and salaries. The atmosphere in the office has improved significantly. Well, except for Karen. After Ray told her that he was staying with Marilyn, Karen submitted her resignation. Ray tried to persuade her to transfer to another office, but Karen was adamant. 2 years later, a wedding invitation arrived at the office. Karen married a doctor. Ray ordered the most expensive gift on their wedding list and included a warm note with it. He did not go to the ceremony. With John, it was a little more complicated. One night, unexpectedly for herself, Marilyn received a message from John in which he declared his love for her and asked her to meet him that evening at the Hilton Hotel, where he had rented a room. Ray met a drunken John at a bar and calmly explained to him why Marilyn wouldn't come. When Ray left, the heartbroken man cried at the bar, finally realizing that Marilyn would never be with him. Marilyn changed her phone number to make sure that a similar situation would not happen again. Over time, she heard rumors that John had transferred to the company's London office. Carla and Paul were a happy accident. At first, when they found out about the pregnancy, fear gripped both of them. But they sat down and talked like the best friends they had been for years and realized they wanted another chance. Then there was the ultrasound and the unexpected news that they were expecting twins. They took this as a sign from Rachel. The birth went smoothly, and their parenting skills quickly returned as they began to rebuild their lives, caring for their children, and hoping for the best. Every Christmas had become a ritual, and the twins now understood its meaning. They surprised Marilyn and Ray with questions about Rachel. The answers often brought both smiles and tears to the parents' faces. As time passed, it became easier to think about Rachel, although the pain of the loss and thoughts of what could have been always remained. And so again they headed to the place where these feelings were aggravated to the limit to the cemetery. They walked slowly past the gravestones until they reached Rachel's grave. Marilyn knelt down and cried silently. Ray joined her and bowed his head. Carla and Paul obediently followed their parents' example. They stood silently in the cool morning as their parents prayed for their lost daughter. Then Marilyn pulled herself together. "Okay, Carla, Paul, hold your balloons until we release them together," she reminded. Each balloon had a little note attached to it, one for each family member. Carla's note wished that her older sister would be around to teach her brother some manners. Paul's note expressed his desire for his older sister to be nearby and not allow Carla to boss him around. Marilyn and Ray's notes went much deeper. Before attaching them to the balloons, they always read them to each other. There were no more secrets between them. Ray wrote, "Dear Rachel, another year has passed and today is your 18th birthday. All I can think about today is you and how brave you were while you were with us. I miss you so much and think about you every day. How I wish I could do more for you. How I wish I could see you grow up and become the wonderful woman you were destined to be. But God had other plans for you, my angel. I remember your desire to celebrate Christmas in white snow, and it hurts me to think why I didn't take us to Canada then or rent a snow cannon to fulfill your wish. But I tried to be the best dad for you. One day we will meet again in heaven, and I will see you. You, Dad." Marilyn wrote, "My sweet baby, I miss you so much. I think about you every day, and so does your dad. I try to imagine you as an adult. It hurts me so much that you couldn't experience so many moments that everyone should have had. Daughter with her mother, Dad calls you an angel, but the truth is that you were an angel for both of us. That's why I think of you as my heavenly angel. You remember how Dad played that song, Willie Nelson, about the angel who flew too low over the earth. That's how I imagine you, my guardian angel who helped me in my darkest moment, and then God took you back to heaven. I love you, baby." The four rose to their feet and, at a signal, simultaneously released the balloons, which quickly rushed upward. The family watched until the balls disappeared from view in the dark clouds that promised snow. The spell was lifted, and the children ran to the car. Ray paused for a moment, still looking up. He knew that the balls would soon lose pressure and fall back to the ground, but was it really such a bad thing to believe that they had reached heaven and that Rachel would read them? He felt his soulmate take his hand. He looked at Marilyn's face and realized that she was thinking the same thing as they began to walk to the car. And suddenly it happened. It started snowing. Large flakes of snow slowly fell, soon covering the ground, leaves, and everything around with their clean cover. The world has become monochrome and clean. Finally, Rachel's wish came true, a white Christmas. The children screamed with joy and circled around the car, trying to catch snowflakes with their tongues. Marilyn and Ray looked at each other as the snowflakes touched their faces, and as tears welled up in their eyes, they both knew that their angel was flying close to the earth again. They continued to look at each other as if time had stopped. The snow continued to fall, softly covering the ground and creating an almost magical silence around. Marilyn stepped towards Ray and placed her hand on his cheek, her eyes sparkling with tears and joy. "She did it, Ray," she whispered. "She gave us a white Christmas." Ray nodded, unable to speak. His chest tightened with emotion and his throat tightened. He hugged Marilyn, and they stood holding each other tightly, as if they were afraid of losing what was between them again. Their children were spinning around, squealing with delight and trying to catch snowflakes on their palms. "Thank you, baby," Ray said quietly, raising his eyes to the sky. The snow continued to fall, slowly and softly, like a blessing from above. Ray and Marilyn knew that there would still be difficulties ahead, that the pain would never completely go away, but in this moment they felt peace. Rachel was with them in every snow clap, in every warm hug, in every moment of their lives. "Let's go home," Marilyn said, wiping away her tears. "We have Christmas to celebrate." Ray nodded, taking her hand. They called the twins, and the whole family headed to the car, leaving footprints in the freshly fallen snow. The road home was quiet, but filled with warmth. There were many more Christmases ahead of them, a lot of laughter, a lot of love. And the snow continued to fall, white, pure, and infinitely beautiful, like a symbol of hope, faith, and love that overcome all trials. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think. Click to the next one. 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 Click to the next one.